Welcome to the deep dive. So you sent us a really compelling piece this time.
Oh, yeah.
It's a transcript from a YouTube video, Coding Mountain Man. We're going to dive into his story today.
Okay. Sounds interesting. What's the angle?
Well, it's all about extracting insights on how our past, can really shape our present, especially when it comes to things like learning, professional growth, that kind of stuff.
Right. And what's fascinating about this one, I think, and maybe what grabbed you too, is it's not just like technical talk.
No, not at all.
It's this really raw, personal story about how early experiences can mess with your head, basically, your mental landscape, your ability to pick up new skills.
Exactly. So our mission here for this deep dive is to really try and understand how early trauma can hit our learning ability, our processing power,
Not just emotions, but like the actual mechanics of thinking.
Yes, precisely.
Yeah.
And just as crucial, we want to look at the flip side, the potential for healing, for growth, for maybe unlocking capabilities we didn't even know were there.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Where does he start?
He kicks it off with a childhood story.
Mm.
Seems small at first, involves some blue and neon rollerblades.
Rollerblades. Okay.
Yeah. He hid them, apparently worried his dad would take them. But then, and this is key, his mind just totally blanked. He couldn't remember hiding them at all.
Wow. So like a genuine memory gap.
Seems like it.
Yeah.
Because when his dad asked, he honestly said he didn't know where they were.
Mm-hmm.
And this led to a really severe reaction from his father.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, it got pretty bad. He mentions being forced into a dumpster, even physical violence. What really struck me reading it was that disconnect, this childhood moment and the huge lasting internal impact it had.
Mm-hmm.
And for you listening, maybe think about that. How seemingly small things, unresolved stuff, might actually have had a bigger ripple effect than you realized.
Absolutely. And he talks about how that fed into this feeling of being, well, his word was dumb,
Right.
feeling like he couldn't grasp concepts even when he wanted to. Like you mentioned being interested in early web design, Facebook, MySpace,
Yeah.
but still feeling inadequate. And many of us can probably relate to that feeling in some context, right? But he directly connects that inadequacy back to that early trauma.
And then the memory of hiding the rollerblades eventually came back.
It did, yeah. But when he told his father later, the response was just dismissive, like, you deserved it anyway.
Oof. That just reinforces everything, doesn't it?
Completely. Just cements that negative self-view.
Okay, so from this really intense personal story, he then introduces a kind of framework. He calls it the results pyramid. Can you break that down a bit? What does that mean for listeners?
Sure. So the pyramid basically lays out a sequence. It starts with an experience we have.
Okay, like the rollerblade incident.
Exactly. That experience shapes our beliefs about the world, about ourselves, about others, which then influences our actions, what we actually do. And those actions ultimately create a result.
Experience, belief, action, result.
Got it. So in his case, the experience of being hurt and frankly terrorized by his father led to a deep belief that people, maybe especially authority figures, aren't kind or safe.
Makes sense.
That belief then drove an action. He started working out, wanting to become physically strong, and the result. Eventually, he actually became physically bigger than his father.
Wow.
Yeah.
Quite a direct line. So the key insight here for anyone listening is to maybe look at your own life through that lens.
Exactly. See if experiences, maybe ones you haven't thought about in a while, could be shaping beliefs that are driving your current actions and outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
It's quite a powerful tool for self-reflection, I think.
Definitely. And this framework seems to lead him to a pretty big realization about himself.
It does. He recognized eventually that he was dealing with the effects of childhood PTSD, stemming from that kind of unstable, difficult environment.
Right. So his struggles with learning weren't just about like not trying hard enough or not being smart.
No, he understood there was a deeper reason, something affecting his actual mental processing.
He mentioned a counselor explaining how trauma can create these pathways in the brain. What's that about? Can you unpack that concept?
Yeah, it's a really helpful analogy. Think of your brain like a landscape, and experiences wear paths into it. When you experience trauma, especially repeated trauma, those pathways become really deep, really well-worn.
Okay.
Through, repeated negative thoughts, emotional responses tied to the trauma, your brain kind of gets stuck in those ruts. It defaults to those familiar, albeit painful, routes.
So that makes it harder to learn new things, to form different kinds of pathways.
Exactly. It makes it much harder to forge the new pathways you need for learning, for processing information effectively, for focusing, for retaining stuff.
And he gives some concrete examples of this, right, in school.
Oh, yeah. Very relatable ones. He
Yeah.
talks about really struggling initially getting D's and C's in school and college, had like a 2.7 GPA to start.
Mhm.
And he specifically mentions trying to learn PHP, a programming language, in college,
Right.
and just hitting a wall, couldn't grasp the logic.
So what did he do?
He resorted to basically memorizing code like pictures, just trying to visually remember chunks of it without really understanding the why behind it.
Wow. Has there ever been something for you, listening, where you felt like that? Just trying to cram and memorize without truly getting it.
That feeling, that brute force memorization, it often signals that something's not clicking conceptually. The brain isn't processing it effectively.
And in his case, it sounds like a lot of his mental energy was just tied up.
Very likely. Tied up managing the background noise, the lingering effects of the trauma, leaving less bandwidth, for the heavy lifting of learning something complex like coding.
But the story doesn't end there, thankfully. He makes a change. He decides to leave that environment.
Yeah, a really positive turn. At 18, he enters a songwriting competition for a college in Texas, and that becomes his way out.
That sounds incredibly brave. A big leap.
Definitely a pivotal moment. And he won a scholarship, a half ride, he called it, which gave him the actual means, the practical way, to get away from the source of that ongoing stress.
And there was still some friction, right, with his dad.
Yeah, he mentions his father trying to kind of reassert control during a Thanksgiving break. But the speaker stood his ground based on his own faith and beliefs at the time.
So that shows a real shift, a growing strength.
Absolutely. A commitment to forging his own path, literally and figuratively.
And this is where that idea of healing, of forming new pathways in the brain, really comes into focus, isn't it?
Exactly. How can you, the listener, sort of apply this idea? Well, as the speaker started having new experiences, positive ones, building healthier relationships, those experiences started creating new neural connections, those new pathways we talked about. Our brains are adaptable. That's neuroplasticity, right?
Right.
So just like those old traumatic pathways got ingrained through repetition, you can strengthen new positive ones through consistent positive experiences, new learning, different ways of thinking.
He uses such vivid imagery for this. He talks about the old pathways getting overgrown with grass and weeds,
Yeah, I loved that.
becoming like an old country path, and eventually just grass in a field. It really paints a picture of how the past's influence can fade.
It's so effective, that imagery, because it shows healing isn't about, like, erasing the past. You can't really do that.
Right.
It's about reducing its power, building stronger, healthier mental routes that become your new default.
And he brings up forgiveness, too, which is
Ah.
interesting in this context.
Yeah, and it's a crucial point. He suggests that holding on to resentment, anger, it actually takes up mental energy,
Yeah.
bandwidth.
Energy that could be used elsewhere.
Exactly. Energy for growth, for learning. So forgiveness in this sense isn't necessarily about saying what happened was okay. It's more about freeing yourself from carrying that weight.
Okay, that makes sense. And he directly ties this healing process, the new pathways, the forgiveness, to his ability to finally learn coding.
He does. He describes it very clearly. As he processed his past, worked through it, his mental capacity actually expanded. Things started to click. Concepts that felt impossible before suddenly made sense.
That really drives home the connection, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Between emotional well-being and just raw cognitive function.
Absolutely. Learning, especially complex stuff that needs focus and logical thinking, it demands mental resources. If those resources are constantly being siphoned off to manage trauma fallout,
There's not much left for the actual learning.
precisely. So healing, essentially, frees up those critical resources.
Then he kind of zooms out a bit. He makes a point about the people around us.
Yeah, it's a really important point about empathy, I think. He points out that lots of people might be dealing with unseen challenges, putting in huge effort just to cope, just to perform day to day.
It's a good reminder. What looks like maybe a lack of ability or motivation.
Could actually be the shadow of past experiences shaping their current mental landscape. And crucially, he emphasizes that our current mental capacity, it's not necessarily fixed, especially if trauma's been part of the picture.
That offers a lot of hope, doesn't it?
A huge amount of hope.
And his final message, it feels really aimed at anyone listening who feels stuck or behind. He says, it's not your fault you're behind in life.
Yeah, that's powerful. Really validating.
It really is, because it takes the blame off,
It's incredibly empowering. It says, look, change is possible. Growth is possible. By actively creating positive experiences, by learning new things, you can literally rewire your brain, build those new pathways and unlock potential you didn't know you had.
He also mentions all the free knowledge out there now, too.
Right, like
Uh,
an encouraging nudge. The resources are available.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up, bringing together everything from coding Mountain Man's experience. What's the core takeaway for you listening?
I think it's that past experiences, especially the tough, traumatic ones, they can significantly impact how we learn, how our minds work. That's real.
And it's a big but.
But healing is also real. Consciously creating new, positive experiences, maybe even working on forgiveness. This stuff actually changes your brain. It forms new pathways, and that allows for real growth, real change in your capabilities.
And like you said, a message straight to you listening.
You're capable of more than you think.
Love that. Okay, so on that note, here's a final thought for you to maybe mull over today. Think about that results pyramid in your own life.
Experience, belief, action, result.
Right. Are there any past experiences shaping beliefs right now that might be limiting your actions? Limiting the results you're getting?
And maybe, just maybe, what's one small step you could take? One tiny thing to start cultivating a new pathway today.
Something to think about. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.